And the river still shines and shimmers in the light as it did in our grandfather's day, when they rode all night to fish in the morning and lived in Willapa Bay.
Danny Kaiser, sorry. He's a geezer, but his name is Kaiser. Sorry about that. From Chinook, Washington, which is that away, right across the river. Bering Sea Strong.
Yes.
Yes.
Also known as, born and raised right here in Astoria, Oregon. I can throw a rock into the river where I earned my very first commercial fishing dollar. But yeah, right on, yeah. 40% Tennessee hillbilly, 60% Yugoslavian, and 100% Astoria fighting fishermen. But I truly cut my teeth in the industry in 1991 when I sailed to the Bering Sea on a little vessel called the Maverick. Truly the toughest fishery on the planet. Now, I was built for the Bering Sea. Strong, athletic, and emotionally unstable. Many people ask, Dan, what did you do with all that money you made in the Bering Sea? Well, I tell you, 90% of it I spent on women, whiskey, and having a good time. The other 10% I just wasted. Now, when we would get ready for the season, we would travel across the Gulf of Alaska. We would head up early. There was the king crab fishery around the Pribilof Islands in September. Then we would move into Garibaldi and the red king crab season. But then the beast of them all was the Opilio season of the Bering Sea. If you can imagine, and now this environment does not exist any longer. Much like if you think about the Iron Curtain of the Steelers in the 70s, the bad boy Detroit Pistons of the late 80s, and the Bering Sea crab fishermen of the 90s. It was truly one of the most grueling fisheries that existed on the planet. We would spend month after month fighting through the weather and the ice and the grueling exhaustion, soul-crushing exhaustion. Now, most of this was staged within the confinements of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. And I'm just going to really quickly start my timer. So that we do not move past our allotted time. There we go. Now, Dutch Harbor was a barren place. Gravel roads, there was no paving, there was no real existence other than just brute force work. The masculinity that would run around Dutch Harbor was just intoxicating. There was a stance of trees. I think there were 6 or 7 of them. They called them the state forest. And they swore to us that there was a girl behind every one. They were far too skinny to house the girls of Dutch Harbor. So the first piece that I'm going to share, since yes, this is supposed to be a venue of poetry, is doing it in Dutch. Dutch Harbor was the place we would ready for the race. King crab in October, and Garibaldi was still in place. Come January would be Opies. This truly was the test. We get the gear together, get fuel, get bait, get rest. The ice, the wind, the freezing spray. And that's just here in Captain's Bay. Dutch Harbor is always moving at such a crazy pace. Some pound the dock, they need a boat. As days wear on, they still have hope. You walk the streets in your little pack, the name of your boat worn proudly on your back. The crew is tight. We drink, we fight. A girl behind every tree, that's one for you and two for me. The season, that's what it's all about. We say a prayer and head on out. We start the grind. We've moved northwest. The days will pass with little rest. Return to Dutch. The boat is full. Unload the crab. More boat, more bait, more fuel. You make the most of your time on land. There are few limits with that draw check in hand. A place so cold and far from home, you wait your turn to use the phone. The kids are fine. They miss their dad. You say goodbye. Your time is done. There's crabs to catch. No time for fun. The race is on to catch the most. Then back to Dutch to raise a toast. That's how it goes for months on end. Dutch Harbor at times is my best friend. The season is done. Gears on the beach. No long embrace or sad goodbyes. Dutch Harbor sucks. It's time to fly. Now, I know many people are familiar with the deadliest catch was really an exaggeration and does a terrible disservice to the Bering Sea crab fisheries. There was a group of men, some chasing a dream, some just desperate to hang on to what they have. It's an interesting group of men, to say the least. Now, everybody aboard the decks of these boats has a certain responsibility. And the way that we share the take, basically the revenue aboard this boat, is you get a percentage. So if you've got, and the average percentage for the deck was 30%. So if you've got 5 guys out on deck, everybody gets 6 if it's dispersed equally. You take one more, it's a little less. You take one, it's a little less. If you take one less, it's a little bit more. Now, if anybody is familiar with a schooner vessel is something that you see. The house is in the stern of the boat. The crew is out in front of the captain. They're hauling the gear from the bow. Not nearly quite as protected, but a much more safe environment as far as the captain being able to see what's going on deck. And then if you see a boat such as the Northwestern, the house is in the bow, the crew is actually hauling the gear from the middle of the ship. They're a little more protected, although the captain does not have constantly a view of what is happening on deck. Now, the most integral part of this crew is the grappler. As this boat is moving on, and I've spent my whole career in the Bering Sea working on a schooner-style boat, standing up in the bow, and as that bow is riding up over the top of 25, 30-foot waves, once in a while you get a peak of the buoy, and then it disappears in the crest of the next wave. Well, as the grappler, your responsibility, you've got a big stainless hook hooked to a line that's maybe 30 feet long, is to grapple that buoy coming along the bow, pull it in to the side of the boat as fast as you can, throw it into the block, and then into the coiler as it hauls that pot up off the bottom of the ocean. Now, you do just not stand there and wait for that pot to come up through the block. There's so much more to do. Once you get everything on board, it's pulling up through the block, you run up over to the sorting table, you shove a few crabs down in the hole, you might run over and put a bait setup or two together, and you're listening. Now, if we're fishing king crab, we might only be in 30, 35 fathoms, 6 feet to the fathom. So you've got one shot. If we're fishing for apelio crabs, we may be as deep as 100 fathoms, which will you will have 3 shots of line, which means you're listening for 2 knots. So you grapple it on board, you throw it in the block, and now you're listening for those knots to come through the block. You run back over, shove a few crabs, make a bait setup, and as that second knot comes through the block, you hustle on back to the rail, hook that pot up, pick it up, land it in the launcher, sort through the crab, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. Days on end, months on end, until that season is said and done. So my next piece is called the grappler. And this was one of my favorite positions on the boat, because it definitely took the most athletic and energetic individual standing on that deck. In the screaming gale and freezing spray, there is one man standing at the rail. Out of the darkness and into the light, it's the man with the grapple, ready for the fight. Buoys on the bow, it's time to let her fly. That shining stainless grapple, it takes a special eye. She streaks into the darkness with a line for a tail. You've hooked the trailer, it's time to haul her in. Throw her in the block, we're on the clock. This is the real deal. You don't stand around as the block sits and spins. The crabs on the table need to get into the tank. You shove the crabs in silence as you listen for the knots. That's how you will know when the pot's about up. Racing back to the rail, the pot is finally here. The hook is in, reverse the block, and raise above the rail. Dog her down, dump her out. This is what it's all about. It's the same every time. Throw the hook, haul the line. The grappler is the man that will set the bloody pace. Through screaming winds and giant seas, the grappler cannot fail. The grappler is the man standing fearless at the rail. Now, as I shared within my introduction, born and raised right here in Astoria, Oregon. Although I do consider myself to be a tuna brat, my mother's side of the family were fishers. They fished this river for most of their life. My father's side worked within the cannery. Bumblebee Seafoods was such an integral part of this community. But in 1979, they shut down Elmore Cannery. Now, we were one of the fortunate ones that were transferred down to San Diego with the company, where we were there for 3 years, and then we moved on to Hawaii, where we were there for 3 years, and then my father took a job in American Samoa, where we were there for 5 years. So we truly had a chance to travel outside of our geographical environment. But still, we would constantly travel back to Astoria. This is where our family has been for generations. My grandfather, Andrew Marinkovich, came through Ellis Island in 1913 and made his way to Clifton, Oregon, where our family still has our homestead. Now, Astoria, from what I remember, and I can remember coming back as a child, and I always would, hope that when we would come back to visit for a month every year, that just like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, that I would see steam and smoke once again coming out of the stacks of Elmore Cannery. But it just never was to be. It has become a community truly striving for an identity. A community grasping so tightly at the tourism dollars in a desperate effort just to keep the lights on. It is just not a vision of what my childhood home once was. I do live in Chinook, Washington, which essentially looks straight back across the river here at Astoria, Oregon. Every morning on my way to work, I'm coming across the Astoria Bridge, and I can see the sun rising behind Coxcomb Hill, which is the hill which the Astoria Column sits on. On a clear day, I can see Mount St. Helens to the left. Majestically, I can see Saddle Mountain standing behind the town of Astoria, and I can still truly believe that this is the home of my past. And then to the right is the graveyard of the Pacific. This truly is my home, and that is my last piece. January 8th is the day God gave to me. I was truly born around the corner and just a few blocks up the street. My father was so proud, he worked for Bumblebee. My mother's side were fishers. This river was their dream. They set their nets adrift as the salmon swim upstream. Clifton was the town, and Marinkovich was the name. A family catching salmon, legends in the game. As a young boy growing up, I watched them work in awe. The men were bigger than life, and my blood ran in my veins, and their blood ran in my veins. I had a skiff and a piece of net. My drift, it was an inside set. I'd watch the men unload their catch. Sweet smell of money, that's what they said. As summer would near, they would ready the gear. North to Alaska, they would all disappear. I hoped as I grew older, they would take me with one day. That day did never come. The Bumblebee up and flew away. Elmore Cannery is where I would play, fishing off the dock as my father worked away. When they shut down Elmore, a piece of Astoria died that day. We would hitch a ride with that big bee. San Diego and Hawaii were just 2 stops for me. Yet destiny would have its way, and I would come home to fish one day. My first drift when I came back was on this river with my Uncle Jack. Yet that was not enough for me, so I packed my bag for the Bering Sea. As I look back and reminisce, the home of my past does not exist. The pilings mark what now is gone. I walk the dock, I work the trade. Slowly I watch as the memories fade. I close my eyes, I hope, I pray, to find my home of yesterday. Well, thank you very much for letting me be part of your Fisher Poets Weekend. And I suggest you put a couple pumps of grease in the old rudder post, light her up, and let Astoria know that the fishermen are back in town.
Now blow the gentle wind o'er the dark blue sea, no more will stay thy hand, since Willie is safe at home with me in his own dear native land.
Okay, thank you so much for talking with us today about the Fisher Poets Gathering. We really appreciate your stopping. Can I ask your names and where you're from?
Christine
And Phil.
from Portland.
Yeah.
And is this your first time at the Poets Gathering?
No, it's
Third.
our third time. Third time
Yeah.
at the Poets.
Okay.
Before COVID and this one.
So if you're here 3 times, you really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's motivated you to come back. What is it you've super enjoyed about it?
Oh, the variety.
The variety. Yeah. There's some of the artists you want to hear longer, and yet 15 minutes, and then you're on to kind of somebody else, and the songs and the poetry and the prose, and some of it's very heartwarming, and some of it's just funny.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, I know we only had performances last night that you probably went to. We haven't seen tonight's yet, but for what you've seen so far this year, what was your favorite?
Oh, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's such a variety.
It's the immersive experience, and there's such heart from each of those that are presenting, and it's such an honor and privilege to be in the audience. So we're loving all of it.
Oh my gosh, you were the perfect people to interview. So you said that so beautifully. So, tips for anybody coming in, or anything you want to tell them to lure them in?
You can't go wrong with any of the venues. Just pick one, and I don't know.
And you can always get up and walk at any time, and it's so welcoming here in Astoria, and it's a perfect spot. And it's small. It feels like intimate encounter, being able to hear these such personal stories, and then you get to mill around and see faces that look familiar and new faces, and you just come. You're gonna love it.
You know what? It's been my privilege to talk with the two of you. Thank you so much for your time.